We, I was just going to ask you to start the recording, but that's good. Welcome everyone to the August 2021 Combined PI and Coordinator calls. We can advance the slide. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of information to present this month, and most of it is not good news. Our agenda, I'll give you a quick overview of where we're at in the whole timeline of the study. We'll go through sort of patient counts and where we're at with all of that. A quick plug for the continuing review for the single IRB at Cincinnati Children's. Most of our time will be spent around all of this Hive transition, which has been anything but smooth. And then in the end, I'll end with a couple minutes of a really cool ancillary study that Jeremy Adler is leading. Next slide. So in terms of the overall study, follow-up will end on March 31st, 2022. Many of you have contracts that are expiring in about 60 days. Those are in the process of being renewed by Cincinnati Children's so that you will continue to get paid for your work through March 31st, 2022, if not a little bit afterwards. Patients who are randomized after April 3rd, 2019 will continue to be followed until the study ends. Please follow your patients as long as possible. With a clinical trial like this, follow-up is our friend. Generally speaking, the first visit that happens in Q1 of 2022 ought to be each patient's final visit. We'll collect their last bit of data, we'll debrief with them, we'll recollect their unused study medicine, and that will be that. There may be some patients where you know they'll make a visit, say in January, and you're sure they're going to come back before March 31st. If that's the case, then we can do an additional visit on March before March 31st, and that would be great. But we want to sneak in as much follow-up as possible, but for sure we want to close things out for each participant who's remaining in the study and in follow-up by the end of Q1 2022. The picture at the bottom shows just a couple of examples of patients and when they'll be due. And so the first row, this patient's last visit will be at some point between now and October 28th. And so they'll be done with everything long before March of 2022. The second patient has a visit 14. It's going to happen during Q1 2022. And so that last visit will be that patient's last visit. The next one, the third row, could end either at visit 12 or at visit 13, because both will happen during the first quarter of 2022. If you're confident that that patient is going to come back during the window of time before March 31st, then it would be great to schedule that visit before March 31st and end in visit 13, which I've bolded and highlighted in Carolina Happy Blue. And the last patient, again, could end at either visit 10 or 11. And it would be great if we could get a visit 11 scheduled at some point after February 19th, 2022. And while that visit window will span to May 20th, it would be good if we can schedule that on the earlier side so that it happens before March 31st. By March 31st, we are going to move on to data cleaning and analysis and all that stuff. So any visits after March 31st won't be logged. Questions at all about kind of study timeline and how to close out each participant's follow-up as it evolves? You can also put questions in the chat box as well, and one of our study team will respond in the chat box, or if it's important for everyone, we'll talk through it later in the call today. Next slide. So during this sort of last period, last stretch of follow-up, schedule patients every 3 months. It is the expectation that all patients in Combine who are sort of at high risk because of their Crohn's and treatment should be seen and examined every 3 months. I say examined in quotes because we recognize that some people may still be doing telehealth encounters, and that's totally fine. Each visit is an opportunity for the clinical team and the study team to assess AEs that may be occurring or may have occurred between visits, assess whether a study outcome or endpoint was met, determine if it's appropriate to continue the study medication and at the same dose of study medication, collect PROs if and when appropriate, and collect biosamples if and when appropriate. Next slide. And just sort of study-wide, here's where we're at in terms of follow-up. You'll see at the bottom, 306 patients enrolled. The next line up, 155 of those have completed the study. And more complete each passing week. 61 have been lost to follow-up or withdrawn, and that leaves the top 2 rows of a total of 90 patients. 50 are active and on study medication, 40 remain in follow-up but are off treatment, either because they met an endpoint and stopped treatment per protocol, or stopped treatment because lack of adherence or whatnot. Next slide. Just a plug for the annual renewal. So the documents were sent out last week by Carrie. They include a site report template, a site staff listing, and other documents and enrollment numbers, which are due back by next week. Next week, that's September 2nd. Contact Anne if you need a copy of the REDCap site deviation log. If you don't know what I'm talking about in terms of the annual review, please contact us immediately. If you haven't received the request from Carrie, please contact us immediately. Put it into the chat box, send us an email, whatever you need to do. But let us know if you don't know what we're talking about, because this deadline is coming up very soon. Next slide. All right, Hive transition issues. Here's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time. And like I mentioned, this is really not good news. Next slide. There have been a number of significant bumps that really substantially impact all Combine operations. Trust me, we are beyond frustrated and disappointed with the lack of attention to detail that Hive has put into this transition process. We will work through this together. We have no other choice. And so, as frustrated as you all are, I am even more so, but we just have to get by. I know this is going to require a ton of extra work at all of our sites. I know it's going to require heightened vigilance and attention to detail at all of the sites. Our UNC site just met yesterday and went through line by line each of our patients that are in follow-up, where they stand, what data has been entered, what data is unable to be entered, which forms need providers to review and sign, how in the world coordinators can enter data and providers can sign data with these new forms and all of the glitches. We'll cover a lot of that in the next couple of slides, but just please trust me. This is not how I wanted the last 6 months of Combine to proceed. We'll go through all of the major issues and some of the temporary workarounds. We'll go through some of the other known glitches. Unfortunately, Hive has given us no firm guidance as to if or when more permanent or optimal solutions will be developed. Next slide. Margie, I'll take this one and the next, and then pass it over to you and Anne. So you may have noticed that the way Hive and the combined forms were designed, I have no idea why they were designed this way, but all personnel have access to the ability to view, edit, enter, or sign off on all forms as if they were the provider or any other role. And so anyone at your sites who has ICN access, even if they're not trained on Combine or part of the Combine protocol, can log in and view or edit or change Combine data. Mind you, no one should be doing that at your sites if they're not trained and part of the Combine protocol. It is a protocol deviation, if not violation, to have non-IRB trained and certified staff touching or viewing Combine data, but we'll leave that alone. And anyone has the ability to sign off as if they were a provider. And so, the workaround for the foreseeable future is, please tell staff at your sites or attendings at your sites that just because they can see and access Combine data doesn't mean they should. They really should not be peering in at all to the Combine forms. Similarly, anyone, including coordinators, can assume the role of a provider, technically speaking, and sign off on forms as if they were the provider. Signing off on these forms in many cases is equivalent to writing a prescription. This is something that a trained physician or advanced practice provider should be doing above the scope of coordinator work. Coordinators should not be signing off on provider reviews. We just have to trust that you guys will be doing this the right way because the system did not provide special access to different roles like the Cincinnati Children's system did. Next slide. Another huge issue is that unlike the Cincinnati Children's system or any other database that was built after the year 2000 has done, data are not being saved dynamically. You need to go through to a verification page and actually hit submit in order for forms to be saved. Now, if you're a coordinator, under the typical process, you would click that ready for review so that the provider gets the review and your part would be done. And if you were a good coordinator all these times since Hive went live, unfortunately, that means that you never saw the verification page. You never hit verify or submit form, and all of that data that was entered, poof, it's all gone. This would apply to most of the visit forms, the adverse event, serious adverse event forms, unscheduled shipment forms, dose change forms, completion termination forms, anything that you ordinarily would have hit the provider review needed button to send off to your study provider. If you hit that button, you wouldn't have gotten access to that submit form and nothing was saved. Crazy, I know. And so Margie on the next slide is going to show us a little bit about the workaround if you are a coordinator and if you're a provider. It's a little wonky, it's a little cumbersome, it should work, and I think we just have no choice but to proceed as Margie's going to direct us. So take it away.
Hi, everyone. Anne and I are going to kind of show you the nuts and bolts of what we've been able to find out as we've gone through and been testing the system. We really appreciate that everybody's been sending the problems they're seeing to us, because that if you're seeing it, other sites are seeing it too. And we've tried to aggregate everything in this presentation. We're also at the end, we want to make sure you're sending everything to the help desk. But here is our first workaround with how coordinators can save data. Typically, when you got to the end of the data you were entering, you would click a checkbox at the bottom, ready for review. And that would send an email to the provider to tell them to go in and look at this visit, review it, and sign off on it. This is not what we want you to do right now, because if you click ready for review and then you close outcomes, the visit's not saved. So what we're going to ask you to do, please, is to not click ready for review, but instead click this box, this next box. That will take you to a verification page. And on the verification page, you need to just make sure you check that you have reviewed the data entered and it's correct. And then this box here is required. So we're asking you to put in whatever you want here, but ready for PI review is a good choice. Once you're done with everything on your end, you click this button, submit form. Only then is the visit, the AE, the completion form saved in the system. After it's saved, you'll get this message. Thank you. The form was submitted successfully. This is what you want to see. And this is the only way you know that the data have been saved. After you get this message, please, we're asking you please to email your provider to let them know that the form is ready for review. No automatic emails are being sent at all. The only way the provider is going to know that you've entered anything is if you contact them to let them know. So we're suggesting that you send the patient name, number, which form and date you've entered, and let them know if the patient is on study drug. This is not, the system doesn't know if the patient is on study drug or not. So some forms that are not appropriate for the provider to fill out if the patient is no longer on active study drug, those will still display, and we have a workaround for that as well. So let me stop here and see if anybody has any questions so far. And if you're asking questions in the chat, I think Anne is looking at those right now, or we'll go over them at the end.
So basically the workaround is don't click the provider review needed. Don't fill out the provider review if you're not a provider. Move on to the next screen and write in anything in the box and hit the submit button, and then let your provider know that you've entered the data and that they can go in and fumble through and sign on their own, because communications between the system and the provider have not yet been enabled. What our site coordinator is doing here is she's writing everything down that she's recording in the database onto a paper case report form and emailing a PDF of that paper case report form to the provider, so the provider knows exactly what patient and what visit was entered and what exactly the provider needs to find and sign off on, which is super helpful. So thanks to Paris for that. And Margie, I'll let you go on.
I have a question.
Sure.
So on that verification page, it defaults to no. So I was leaving it with no and hitting submit. And I get the thank you that the form was submitted. But I don't, when I go back to the patient's page, it doesn't show that the visit anywhere. So I don't know that it actually was submitted. I can't see it.
Thank you for letting us know that. We'll make a note of that. So you're saying
Okay.
on this page here with verification, you're saying no at this
I
point?
guess because I thought the verification, either it defaults or I've been choosing no. I can't remember, but I thought it meant for the provider. So that's why I hit. That's why I was leaving it no or choosing no, because I thought the verification was for the provider to say everything is complete. I guess. So I
Thank-
wasn't sure what to answer. Yeah.
It can be. Bernadette, what form were you using when this happened?
I did a normal visit,
There was a study
Okay.
visit. Okay.
a good study visit. Yep.
Because I know that it
so
works differently on different forms that require the
Okay.
provider review. So we'll mark this down as an issue with the study visits as well.
So should I be seeing on the patient page the visit show up under their list? 'Cause
Yes.
I-
Yes.
Okay. So do you think I should re-enter all the data? Like, should I go in and redo the visit and do it as yes?
No, let's just wait. We can bring Dan Jeffers into it. He's been able to see a lot of things that are sitting behind the scenes that we're not able to
Okay.
see. And he's been able
Okay.
to turn on some switches and recover some data that we thought was lost. So don't enter
Okay.
anything just yet, but I'll circle back with you this afternoon.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
And whoever is noticing funky things, don't blame yourself. It's probably a system issue. And so please let us know, and Margie will tell you, but put in a help ticket as well. It's unlikely that you're doing something wrong and more likely that it's a problem with the system.
So once we get to the point where the coordinator's entered the visit, has not clicked ready for review, and has notified their provider, this is what we want the provider, we think the provider is going to see when they go into the visit. So you would go into outcomes, put in the patient name or number and search for them. It brings up all of their ICN visits, and on the right side of the screen, it brings up all of their combined visits. You have to scroll through to find the right visit that you need to approve, and then you push the select button. So at that point, you're now able to review any of the data that has been saved for that visit for that patient, just like you would have done in the past. It's all should be there. And I hope you will weigh in here on this, because I think they have to enter data related to the SVCDAI before they go to the review section.
I do, and I want to try a tip that Ryan just put into the chat box, where she says that sometimes you need to refresh the page. So that might be what Bernadette is missing, and this might be what I missed when I was testing this, is that when I was entering the visit for the SVCDI score, I just got the score, but I did not see any of these questions until I went in afterwards. So it's possible that if I had refreshed the page, then these might have appeared. But essentially what happened with this one is that, yes, the coordinator entered all of the information for this score, then saved it. And when the provider goes in, he or she will find these other questions that they need to answer in regards to the score, whether they feel the patient was in remission or not.
To answer these questions, you have to go into edit mode, which means you have to click on a pencil icon. It's usually up at the upper right side of the screen. You click on that and that takes you into edit mode, which is a very good thing, because initially everything was in edit mode immediately when you entered into the database. And now it's in view mode and you have to actively go into edit mode. So click on the pencil to edit. You'll see an X where the pencil was, and that indicates that edit is on. And when you want to close edit mode, you click on the X, and it asks you if you want to save your edits, and you would say yes. So what we're asking the providers to do when they go in to review any of these things is to go to the last page your coordinators entered and to click this box ready for review. And then press the next button. When you click that, it will bring up the review list that the provider has to enter and a signature box, like it did in the old system. And you would just go through and enter the questions that are relevant for your patient, and sign your name here. You can write in your name, type in your name, or you can, in some of the boxes, they let you sign it with a mouse, but all of them will take a typed name. This is, again, I'm sorry, I may not have said this, is for patients who are on active study drug. If they're in follow-up but not on study drug, you have a different decision tree and path to go on. After you write your signature and you submit, or you go to next, you'll get the verification page again that your coordinator had already filled out. Just check to see that this is yes, that it's accurate and complete. And this box is required, reason for change. So we're suggesting that you put something in this box that, Dr. So-and-so reviewed it on this date. Just so we have an audit trail. Right now, we don't have an audit trail that is visible to us. So we don't know the last time anything was changed and the date it was changed. So this is something we'd like to maintain manually. And because you're required to put something in this field anyway, that's helpful for us. The X up here indicates you're in edit mode. If you're not in edit mode, it will show a pencil and you need to click on that. And then to save your changes, you have to submit the form. We have a slightly different tree if your patient is not on study drug but is in follow-up. In the past, providers weren't, by protocol, providers aren't required to sign off and fill out certain fields. They're not relevant if the patient is not on study drug. But in this case, we still want providers to look at the visits, and you'd have to follow a different process. So if your coordinator says this patient is ready for you to review, but they are not on study drug, you go into the visit, you do not check this box. And you click next, and it brings up the verification page. This is thanks to Katie Lake, who had this great idea that we just bypass the ready for review. You go in and again, put in something in the text box equivalent to acknowledging that the doctor has gone through and reviewed it. And again, you press submit in order to save the form. So
for the provider, the coordinator says, hey, Mike, I just entered in visit 12 for this patient, go ahead and sign the provider review. Me as a provider, I figure out is a patient on study med or not. If they're on study med, then I click ready for review and then go through the rest of the process as normal. If they're not on study drug, then I don't click ready for review. And then I just say, yep, I've reviewed things, it's accurate. And then as a reason for change, I looked at this today, patient not on study drug, done, submit. And then I get the happy screen.
We hope, but that's the plan. And perhaps your coordinator could give you a heads up whether they're on study drug or not. But that's our two different ways to go about reviewing visits or completions. Actually, completions, providers have to review in all cases. So Anne's going to take you through the pharmacy side because that is not automated either, and we've got some workarounds on that.
So previously, everything that you had completed, all the forms that you had completed, any dose changes, any study completions, all of that would have been automatically sent to the pharmacy. And these included the off-cycle shipments as well. This was a system that was tied in together, and it seemed to usually work pretty well. Right now, the pharmacy is completely separate from this system. They are receiving manual updates and they are no longer tied into these forms. So although we still ask you to complete them and for the provider to sign off on them, we are handling this in a manual way so that right now we have someone at Hive that is letting us know daily of any dose changes, of any off-cycle shipments or any study completions. And then we monitor to make sure that the provider has signed off on that. Once the provider signs off, we will send that information to the pharmacy. But right now it is a fully manual system, and any way that you can help us, it would be great. So if you know of a patient who's going to have a dose change or off-cycle shipment, feel free, and it would be super helpful if you do email me or email the pharmacist also, and to let them know that this is coming down the pike, and then we can keep a close eye on it to make sure that it happens. Some of the things that I was running into, but I've heard that maybe some haven't had issues. I was not able to create an off-cycle shipment. It kept showing up as processing. I thought that that meant that it was waiting for the provider to sign off, but that was not the case. I could not reopen that form. So that's something that has been, I've let Hive know about. On off-cycle shipments, I was not able to get the provider signature page, regardless of whether I clicked ready to review or not. It just was not there. I don't know. Please let me know if anyone else has had that issue. The dose changes do not show up on the main page. Again, this could be a refresh issue that I will be sure to include anytime that I'm seeing things missing. And again, over communication is super, super helpful. We are tracking everything and we are working with Hive on a daily, weekly basis to get this working as well as possible.
Real quick, Anne, so you all at your sites, when the pharmacy sends out a shipment, you should get a little email confirmation that night. Usually it's in the middle of the night that says the shipment was sent. Just make sure that it's a patient that ought to be getting medicine rather than someone who's completed the study or for whom you think that you discontinued medicine because their liver enzymes were up or whatever. Make sure that it looks like it's the right dose, just as another double check. And when you are seeing patients who are on study drug, just make sure that they have a abundant supply of study medicine and we don't need to do a workaround to get them another shipment from pharmacy.
Do you want me to take this, Anne, about
Oh,
reports?
Sorry, I was answering a question here. Let me answer it in real time. So Dr. Galati was asking about, for patients not on study drug, will providers still need to edit the first page and answer the question regarding patients with the SPCVAI score? The answer is yes. And you're going to run into this on several of the different pages because this system really has absolutely no idea which one of these patients are on study drug or off a study drug. So you're going to have to answer that one because I believe it is a required item. And then also when you go through your review, a lot of the questions do not pertain to patients that are off study drug, but I believe that you have to answer them anyway. So that is something that we've brought to Hive and we're working with them. But again, it's tied to that this is sort of a dumb system and does not know which patient is which. And Alicia asked for a cheat sheet on who to contact and what to contact for. And absolutely, we will be sending that out after this afternoon. You will be getting a copy of these slides, a package of these paper CRFs, and we can send you a who to contact cheat sheet as well. So one of the things that you all know also is that we no longer have any of the reports that many of us relied on. We are tracking the study visits manually, and everyone should have gotten a copy of their current patient schedule, whether they are on drug or just off drug, but still in follow-up. Please let us know. I'm marking those daily as I hear of anyone that is completing or lost a follow-up or has had a visit. If you can let us know when you're changing that, that would be great, because that is a manual change right now. And we can get these to you in whatever manner you want. If you want them monthly, if you want them twice a month, just let us know how you prefer to get that information. And also with the pharmacy shipments. So this is something else that we are doing manually now, working very, very closely with the pharmacist, and to ensure that everyone is getting their shipments on time. There are no longer any types of blocks on the shipments. It used to be that if patients weren't seen in, what was it, 200 days, 180 days?
180.
Yeah. That they would automatically be put on a do not ship list. That does not happen anymore. So we have to be extra vigilant and stay up to date on who's on medication, when was the last time they've been seen, are you able to contact the person or the family to find out if the child is okay. And to make sure that the shipments are going out as they should. So you should still be getting the automated shipment, because that did come through the pharmacy itself. So when a shipment goes out, the coordinator does get a copy that the shipment goes out. It doesn't happen 100% of the time. I would say maybe about 90%. So if you think that your patient is due for a refill, I'm tracking this as well. And so you can either contact me for the next one, or I can share the data with you on your patients. Go ahead, Margie.
Okay. So the biggest takeaway is that we just want you to please be vigilant about monitoring your patients and following up your patients. The SAE process remains the same. We with the secure fax, because that was outside of this database system, but you need to email Anne to alert her that the forms are coming. Please keep a close eye on lab results and follow the protocol closely for any abnormal labs in terms of reducing methotrexate or ceasing it altogether. Follow ongoing AEs until they're resolved, and we're going to go through that on another slide. They're a little hard to find in the new system, but we'll show you what we know. Unblinding will be done manually instead of automatically. Right now, patients who complete on study drug are eligible to be unblinded. And patients, but that was done automatically. And now we will just work through the pharmacy to help you with that manually. You'll just need to let us know, would be useful, because it isn't always something we're alerted to. Patients may be unblinded if they complete the study on study drug and any visit after visit 10 at this point, just so you're aware of that. PROs, research labs, concomitant medications, colonoscopies, they can be best tracked right now on paper CRFs, but that is all, I saw research labs are now turned on in the system. So as things progress, more of these might be available online to you. But for right now, if you need to use paper CRFs, please do. And we will resend that packet of paper CRFs to everybody so that you have them. And then here are a few other little known issues. They're not little necessarily, but they're things that we know about and we've talked to Hive about. We are in communication with them on a very regular basis and with ICN staff. And so they have a very long list of things that they are trying to fix for us. This is one that's on it. The visits are currently displayed out of order. So instead of visit 10 coming after visit 9, it comes after visit 1. So they're displayed visit 1, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then visit 2. So if you know you entered a visit 11 and you can't find it, it would be below visit 1. So just be aware that to look for it there. AEs are displayed by the date they're entered, and it doesn't list for you in the form list what the AE is. So before you used to be able to see that it was a fever or nausea, and now you can't see that until you drill into it. So it's a little harder for you to find them and to mark when they've been resolved. But know that they're in there. They're just listed right now by date. And do you have any tips about that, or they just have to have a good sense of when the date was to find them?
Yeah, they're actually entered, they appear by the date that it was entered. So it might be really good to mark that down on if you are using the CRFs to indicate the date that you entered the information. Again, if it was done by start date of the AE, you'd be able to find it. But otherwise, unless you are taking notes, it's going to be almost impossible to be able to track your data entry dates.
And Anne, can you talk about this one as well, please?
Yes, so what we're finding, and you can help us with this too, is that this is an example of a data transition issue. And I've seen this in other areas. We're trying to capture it so that we can have Hive help us with this. But this was an example of an SAE where we have most of the text, but the check boxes, the information didn't come through when the data was transferred. So we have the information, it's just not being displayed correctly. I think it's sort of a data mapping issue. So if you are seeing anything that is blank, that you know had data in there previously, don't freak out. Send us a screenshot. We will send that to Hive so that they know that mapping issue needs to be fixed. So the data is all there in the background. We just need to get it to display properly.
So just to summarize again, if you can go back a screen, what this is illustrating is for some of the forms, if you had entered them in the old Cincinnati Children's system and you go to view them in Hive, it might look strange, either empty when you know you entered the data on the Cincinnati Children's system, or we were looking at one at our team yesterday and it actually looked like the wrong box was checked. And you know, again, the data from Cincinnati Children's are backed up, but you may not be able to view them appropriately, and Hive is looking into that as well. But if you're looking at an old form and something looks funky, just note it, send us a screenshot, put in a ticket. It's likely a Hive issue, not your issue.
So to go back to reporting, the best, most efficient way to get these issues in front of Hive is to send a help desk email. And you can send it to either helpdesk@improvedcareNow.org or support@hivenetworks.com, but they both go to the same place. And they have a process set up that they will review, create a ticket, review them, close the ticket. But please, when you send these emails, always copy Anne and me on them, because we are trying to keep an aggregate list of everything and have a sense of when things are being reported and when they're being resolved. So it's very helpful for us. And then we can communicate with coordinators who are seeing the same thing. So please, when you see an issue, take screenshots, send it to the help desk, and also copy us. And Mike has talked about what they just did at UNC, but this is, in summary, we just suggest that the coordinators, PIs, all the combined team members at your site meet regularly to discuss each participant and make note of what follow-up is needed. Is the patient overdue? Can you get that patient in and get them scheduled? What blood work is due? Has it been ordered? Are PROs due? Are biosamples due? If you need biosample supplies, just reach out to me and I will get those sent to you. Is the patient on study drug? Have they met any outcomes? Very importantly, do they need dose adjustments? Are there any AEs or SAEs that need to be aware of and followed? We will have sent, and we will send out again paper copies of all the combined forms in case the data entry is delayed or lost. If it may be very helpful to keep these as well. We suggest, we know that it messes up a little bit the source document side of things, but right now it's more important that we are certain we have all the data. So please keep them on paper CRFs if you have any doubt that it's being maintained in the system. And that's the Hive story so far. So are there any more questions or comments before Mike goes on to better news?
All right, well, I'll go through this cool ancillary study, and then there should be some time at the end for any Hive-related questions, or put them into the chat box. And again, this is recorded and will be sent to you all as well to reference. And we are going to have to just do our best to get through this. But moving on, next slide. Really thanks to Jeremy Adler at Michigan. For putting together and getting some funding for this neat combined ancillary study. You may know of the PANTS study that was done in the UK, personalizing anti-TNF therapy in Crohn's, and the inclusion criteria were greater than or equal to 16 years of age, which is a European adult, and having active luminal Crohn's. This particular study excluded patients with non-European ancestry and tested anti-drug antibodies, as well as did HLA typing. And this, go on the next slide. This paper was a sort of ancillary study to the main PANTS analyses. In the first 12 months, 44% of participants developed anti-drug antibodies. By 36 months, 65% of patients developed anti-drug antibodies. Again, that is why we are doing combined to see if methotrexate at a low dose orally can prevent anti-drug antibodies. This study found that anti-drug antibodies were 3 times as common in infliximab-treated patients versus adalimumab-treated patients. And anti-drug antibodies were more common in anti-TNF monotherapy versus combo therapy. Again, providing some adult data to at least add further credence to the strategies that we are testing in combine. Next slide. And the cool thing that this study showed was that HLA-DQ-A105 was also a predictor of immunogenicity or anti-drug antibodies. And what you can see here to the right is amongst infliximab treated patients and amongst adalimumab treated patients, depending on the number of copies of the HLA-DQ-A105 allele, the immunogenicity was greater in those who had versus did not have the A105. Next slide. 40% of white adults do have this A105. In other words, 40% of patients are really at high risk of developing anti-drug antibodies, about twice as common as in individuals without that allele. Next slide. And so some of the unanswered questions are, well, gee, what about HLA-DQ-A105 and the risk of anti-drug antibodies in kids? Might A105 predict those who benefit more from combination therapy versus those who don't need it? And what is the relationship between A105 and drug levels in kids? Next slide. And so what do we have in combined? We have nearly 300 patients enrolled who started off on a anti-TNF and have been prospectively followed for years with blood samples collected, generally speaking, at 2 time points, with anti-drug antibodies already being measured. And Dr. Adler was able to get some generous funding from a donor to take that banked blood, send it to LabCorp, and test those samples for A105 alleles. And with that, this will be the largest prospective pediatric study of anti-TNF initiators with HLA-DQ-A105 measurement and anti-drug antibodies, as well as clinical outcomes measured serially over a up to 3-year time period. So really cool that we're able to do this with our combined data and samples. Next slide, and that may be it.
Mm-hmm.
So questions about HLA as an ancillary study. Again, special thanks to Jeremy for making this happen for us. Or any questions about Hive or data or anything. I knew we threw a ton of information out at you. And yes, Dorsey said that looking at non-whites will be interesting. Most of our combined patients are Caucasian, but we did not exclude them and actually worked hard to include them. And so we will have some of the first data available in non-whites, albeit small numbers.
Hey, Mike, it's Amy Quinn. Did you say what the timeline is for that study? Has it already started?
We are in the process of, getting all the legal stuff done with LabCorp.
Okay.
And so, any of your patients who have blood samples coming up, we'll be able to collect them and not too late. We'll likely batch ship everything to LabCorp all in one fell swoop.
Would it be okay to talk to patients about, just to let them know that this study is happening, or no, not yet?
Sure, fine to talk to patients. Patients were consented in the beginning for biosample storage and, future uses, including genetics. Some patients said no to that, and obviously those samples won't be going. Yeah, no, it's really cool. It's really exciting. And yeah, it's not a secret.
Yeah, we did not have one single family say no. Everybody consented to blood sample, and it's just always nice to say, hey, it's actually being used for something worthwhile. And so just thought as I see people, it would be interesting to let them know.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Good. Nice to end on a good note.
Yes. All
And
right.
just a quick thing on logistical issues. So we are taking attendance, and TI, if you could let me know who you are, that would be super helpful, but I do have everyone else marked down. So thank you for coming in today. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.